Okay, hi Jenny.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Doing well. It's a slower day today, and it's a
It-
Monday, so that always feels really good.
I love that. Well, I'm so glad to chat with you today. I have been a fan of yours probably since the pandemic started. I think I discovered you during that time, and um, with Oh Joy, I have off and on talked about mental health because it's been something that's been so important to me, not only as somebody who grew up as an Asian American where mental health was not discussed. And I did not know how to vent my feelings or talk about my feelings or express it. And so as an adult, it all just came exploding out of me. Um, but also as somebody who knows I have a lot of people who can relate to that. And so I found you during a time that was so stressful and crazy. And I would love for you to just tell us a little bit about what you do, both on the internet, but also in your real everyday life.
Yeah, well, for me, I'm a huge fan of yours. I've been following you for probably over 10 years now when I was pregnant with my first child and just really needing some like joy and inspiration in my life. So thank you for the work that you do, first of all. And also for creating space for us to have this conversation. We were talking earlier about how when you see someone who looks like you talking about a topic that often is stigmatized or taboo, it opens up the mind to what we could do, right? What we could talk about for ourselves. And so, well, my day job, I feel like I have a couple hats similar to you, I'm sure, but my day job is I'm a clinical psychologist here in Houston, Texas. I have a private practice where I see probably 80+% Asian American clients at this point, or individuals of color. And I always say that this is like the heart and soul of my work because I'm such a relational person that seeing clients in therapy, getting to know them, getting to see them struggle and grow and move past their stuck points is such a joy for me. I always say I don't want to ever retire because I would miss this part of my work so much. And then I'm also an author. So recently wrote my first book, Permission to Come Home. And it has been a love letter to our community to reclaim mental health in ways that resonate for us from our backgrounds and our stories. And then I'm also a corporate and nonprofit speaker, speaking about the intersections of Asian American identity, mental health, racial trauma, and how we can build inclusive workplaces for Asian Americans, but people of color, right? People with marginalized identities. And so I'd say those are the facets of my work that feel really meaningful and give me purpose. And yeah, just really give me a sense of like life these days.
I love that. And I have to share with everyone how you have an Asian American mental health resource where you can find an Asian American therapist through this resource listed by state and by city. And last year, when I was going through a really rough time and needed to find a new therapist, because I had had a lot of trouble finding one in LA, which I talk about in a funny story on my Substack, I used your resource and I found someone who has been my therapist now for over a year. And I love her so much. And I have had various therapists before. We've been in therapy for, my own self, also for helping us with our kids and stuff. And so I've had variety. And there is something that I can say that really does help resonate when the person who you're speaking to understands your cultural background a little bit. And there's a part you don't have to explain to them or always have a caveat for. And that's not necessarily a thing that everyone needs in terms of their therapists. But for me, I found it very helpful. So thank you for putting to that resource for people all over the country.
Of course. And it's so affirming to hear that it's helpful too, like in real life. So thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So today I want to talk a little bit about the idea of feeling stuck. I touched
Mm.
upon this a little bit in a recent Substack episode that I did when I was talking about the difference between a therapist and a life coach, and I've experienced both. But the word stuck feels very relevant for right now. Here we are right now today. It's 2023. We've gotten through 2+ years of a worldwide pandemic. And now we're in this year where things are sort of quote unquote normal, but yet we're all feeling the effects of what the last few years have done for us, how it's changed our relationships, either friendship, marriage, dating, work, our relationship with our jobs, with our family. So I would love to hear more about what you're hearing from people about feeling stuck right now.
Mm. I think you're so right that post-pandemic, I mean, when we were in lockdown, things really slowed down, right? People's circles shrunk. And in some ways, I kind of love that because it was the first time in my life where I was not moving at this urgent pace. And at the same time, it almost feels like we're in this, like, maybe feeling of like defrosting from that, right? Like there was almost like a slowness. And so we almost need to warm back up to the movement and the normalcy that the world has kind of reclaimed. And yet, I think a lot of people start to realize things about their lives that perhaps different ways of living, different pace, different rhythms, or different intentions and goals that they saw in some of the quiet and stillness in pandemic that they want to implement and include moving forward, but maybe we don't know how because our systems and our structures aren't really built naturally for that. And so sometimes it feels kind of countercultural to go against, right? Maybe saying no to things like that feels like a big, I don't know, like you're giving up something if you say no, right? Or you're not
Mm,
engaging you're supposed to. And so when I think about stuckness and clients who are feeling stuck, it almost feels like it falls into a couple categories, the reasons why. One is they don't know what to move towards, right? They're in a season where you're kind of almost wandering the valley and you're like, which mountain do I climb? I don't know which one's
yeah.
worth it. Which one feels valuable to me? That's going to put me in a different place. And maybe I can't even see what I want or deserve yet. And then there's another category of I can see the mountaintop, but I don't know how to get there. And in
Mm,
fact, I'm terrified. I'm scared because what if I start climbing and I trip and I roll all the way back down to the bottom of the mountain and I'm stuck in that valley again? And so there's almost this question of should I even bother? Should I even try? Because the effort needed is so high in our minds, you know? And then I think there also kind of the stuckness that comes with I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I have nothing left to mobilize in a direction that feels like I need to be going in. And yet at the same time, I know this place that I'm in right now, this doesn't feel right. But I cannot get that energy to move forward.
I can relate to that so much. I think that the stuckness doesn't necessarily have to feel like it touches every part of your life. I think so many of us can relate to that feeling in parts of our lives. One part might be just thriving and doing great, but another part might completely feel exactly in sync with what you're saying. And I know that I can feel that for various parts of my life and have felt that. I think also there is something that comes with a certain point of age. And I'm finding this a lot with my friends who are around my age. I'm in my mid 40s, and there's something about you've been doing your specific career for a while. If you have kids, they are at a certain age. If you've been in a relationship, you might have been in that relationship for a while. You're sort of at a stage of life where whatever you've been doing it for a while. And it's a much different feeling than when we were in our 20s. And sometimes I look at kids, that makes me sound so old, but when I look at young adults in their 20s who may be doing a similar job to me, or maybe I can look at and say, oh, that's what I was like back then. I feel so old saying that, but what is it about that time period where we do tend to get stuck? Because I don't want to think that this is, you know, this is a part of being middle aged, that we're always just going to be stuck, because that's not the case. It's just I see a lot of friends around my age going through it, coming out of it, and there's a little bit of like an ebb and flow there.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that there's something about our developmental staging in this midlife, right? 35 to 45, maybe even 50, where I think we now have the maturity to say that like our future has a sunset season too, right? That at some point, maybe work life starts to come to a close for some people. At some point, you're now an empty nester, and you can see that almost on the horizon.
Mm.
There's something about the time limitedness that I think becomes more apparent as you hit that middle age. And I think people talk about midlife crisis, right? Like, and what is that about? And I have so many friends who are like, I feel like I'm in a midlife crisis. I feel like I need to move, or this is my last chance. I need to
Yeah.
do something, take on a second career, maybe have another child or have my first child. Because if I don't do it now, it's going to slip through my fingers, right?
Mm.
And so I think suddenly time becomes a component that we see. And if you have kids, you're now seeing your kids get older. And if you have parents that are still with you, you are seeing them age perhaps at a
Mm.
speed that, and sometimes I feel like my stuckness is I feel like I'm in that sandwich generation where I have aging parents, I have kids that are growing, and I have my life and my marriage and everything within that. And I'm trying to make space for it all, but it's so much that it almost feels like it's causing a freeze response. Like it's just too much. I can barely get through the day, much less plan for the week or the month, right? And so I think middle age, or what people are calling this kind of like, we have adolescence and we have middle age essence, whatever you call it, right? This is an era that we actually maybe don't have good models for, because a lot of our models are movies about 40-year-olds freaking out about their life, right? Or we have models of people who are like, well, this is it. I'm just going to rinse, repeat, recycle this the next 40 years. And sometimes we don't see models of people saying, you know what? It's taken me 40 years to realize this about myself. And now I'm going to move in that direction in an intentional and deliberate way. And I think that there's something about perhaps seeing this next season as a potential for growth and
Mm.
excitement and opportunity. Because now, and I say this with my friends, I'm done proving myself to people. I'm done caring about what they think or what they want. I'm finally in a place where I feel like maybe I'm in the driver's seat. But historically, society says, oh, you're now in middle age. That's not exciting or fun or interesting. You're in the thick of it. You're in the thick of duty, obligation, responsibility. Those things aren't fun. And I'm kind of like, I'm so excited actually for my 40s. And I'm turning 40 this summer. And I'm just like,
Oh, congrats.
thank you. But I'm like, what does this mean? What's next? What do I want next?
Mm.
And maybe those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves to move out of this stagnancy that sometimes feels like is put on us by society.
I agree. I mean, I think that it's one of those things where we've spent our 20s building up to this career, this life, whatever that future was that we planned for ourselves, that we put all of our hard work into. And in many cases, we've done it. Some cases, most cases, it didn't go exactly as planned, but here we are. And I love the idea of that we don't see a lot of models of that. And I think that's one thing that I'm really striving to do and to be able to be open with the people that I do have access to sharing with is the fact of, hey, sometimes you're going to be in a creative rut. Sometimes you're going to argue with your spouse. Sometimes, there's lots of things. Sometimes you're not feeling like a great mom. There's lots of things that happen. And I think, especially because of social media, we only see the best parts of everything. And that's why it's so nice for me to be able to come across people like you who are not only vulnerable about your own personal experience, but also helping people to move through their stuckness. I also find that as an Asian American woman, there is a little bit of an expectation on us to present just everything is great, to not show that anything is wrong, to show that our plans are not working, or to show failure. And those are all things that, I mean, that's how we grew up. That's how I think our past generation lived. I mean, how many of our friends' parents do you know who aren't happy in their marriages, weren't happy in their careers, or basically weren't happy, but just sucked it up because that's what you were taught to do. And I think it's up to our generation to pass on to our children that, yeah, sometimes you need to work hard, and not every day is going to be amazing, and there's going to be some days when you have to do stuff that you don't love, and that's part of life. But there's also certain parts of life that you don't have to just suck up and just do. You can make changes, whatever stage of life that's in. Make changes that make sense for you and your family and your stage of life and your finances, and all of the things that are both practical and the dreamy part of it too. Um, are there some sort of final tips you can give us for anyone, really? Small steps you can take for feeling unstuck, regardless of what parts of your life you're feeling stuck in.
Absolutely. When we think about stuckness, sometimes it feels like it's a psychological stuckness, like my mind can't step outside of these barriers or limitations of where I'm at. But it's also a bodily stuckness.
Mm.
You feel stuck. Your body feels trapped as well. It feels, in some ways, frozen, immobilized. And so, one of the things I'm a big believer is that the mind will follow the body just as much as the body will follow the mind. They're so intimately connected. And so, what does it mean to act in a small, tangible way in the direction of where you hope to be? And allow that movement and feedback from the environment and data to be accumulated for you to keep building on that. For example, like if you're like, I want to be more, healthy. I want to be healthier. I want to move my body, but I've never been somebody who exercised before, right? Well, what is one small incremental thing you can do to be maybe 1% more active today? And maybe that's just walking to the end of your street and walking back. But in that walk, what have you told your mind? You've told your mind that I am somebody who commits to myself and makes a promise towards the values and goals that I have. It's not just about that walk, right? It's about the promise that you've committed to yourself, that you will take care of yourself and you will make a move. And maybe you take that walk and you run into a neighbor, and the neighbor's like, oh, I didn't know you like to take walks. Let's walk together, right? Now you've introduced another variable in this movement that you've created. And I'm a huge believer that traction builds upon itself. Or let's say you want to start a business, but you've never told anyone about this dream. What does it look like to share this dream with a trusted, safe person? And they're like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I know this person who is doing something that is similar or related. Now you've created motion in your life. And so I think stuckness will say, no, lock it down, don't move. It's too much, too scary, too heavy of a lift. But traction and action doesn't require much to get moving. But the problem is we think action is finding a rental space for your business. That's action. That's what counts as tangible action. Or raising funding for this business. You'll get there. But if you set that as your first step, often you never get there because that's too big. It's too overwhelming to think that way, right? And so I'm a big believer that stuckness is simply a state of non-movement. And so what is to introduce movement in a tangible, accessible, and easy way? And that's my requirement with clients. It has to be easy. It has to be something where you don't even bat your eyelashes at. You're just like, oh, I could do that. I could definitely do that. Then do it. What's keeping you doing that very easy thing?
I love that. I think also, there's ways that we can apply that to relationships too, because what's happening right now, I think a little bit within interpersonal relationships is maybe we're feeling distance from friends after the pandemic. Maybe we're feeling distance in our marriage after the pandemic. And that feels like a trickier thing to get unstuck from because it's not just about an action we can take. There's more than one person involved here. So, could you give us one example of a step you could take towards maybe some relationship stuckness?
When I think about relationship stuckness, I think one of the things that kind of breaks down relationships over time is actually not conflict, it's apathy. It's a neutral feeling, it's a indifference towards each other. Because slowly we start to migrate in different directions when that happens, right? I actually would rather be in conflict and having to move through them, these conflict waves, than to say, I feel nothing, I don't engage, I'm not really interested. Because that means that there's no points of contact. There's no learning about each other. There's no growing. There's no communication or dialogue. And so if you feel stuck, one of the things you could do is introduce a novel setting or activity or something outside of your typical routine. Because over a pandemic, right, work-life lines were blurred. Everything started to get really mixed together. And so I think a lot of couples were working side by side, then eating lunches side by side, then getting off work side by side. You were in this kind of like blurred space. And when that happens, you kind of run on autopilot. There's like oh yeah, this is just status quo. Nothing's notable or necessarily exciting or unusual about your day. And so what does it look like to sign up for something like a one class or one activity that puts you both outside of your comfort zone? Right? Maybe, I don't know, you go rock climbing and you never have done that before. But under novel circumstances, the brain wakes up. It says, oh, what's this? We got to pay attention because this is not something I know how to do. This is not routine. And this is why travel, a lot of couples love to travel together because it places each other in these really unusual circumstances. And now you have to explore that and process it together, right? You see your partner, trying to speak French and they're failing at it miserably, but you're laughing together, right? Or you're zip lining together and this is so terrifying, but you're doing it together. There's something about novelty that helps to wake the brain up from its state of stagnant kind of routine. And so I would say start there. Now, I'm not saying ignore conflict or ignore perhaps that there are relational problems, right? And we all have them. But I also believe that we need positive or unique touch points. We can't have all our relational time be spent going through the intensity and the conflict and the resolution, right? We need balance, even in the midst of our work. And a lot of us are in deep relational work with each other. But I also hope you're laughing. I also hope you're trying new things together, right? Because that makes the work worth it, makes the relationship worth fighting for.
Ah, thank you. I love that so much. Well, Jenny, I mean, I appreciate your insight and just all of these tips so much, which I know so many people can relate to. You do such amazing work, and I'm so grateful to have met you virtually on the internet. And thank you again for sharing all of this with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. And if I have one challenge for all of us today, right, is to take one action, one small action in the direction that you want to be in. That's it.
I love
Sounds
that.
really simple.
I love that. Yeah, I love that because I agree with you that, sometimes it feels so overwhelming to make changes, but to think about it in that perspective feels very actionable and reasonable for all of us.
Mhm.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Jenny.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.